Hey guys, John here, and we're back with another Pigments video, and today's is going to be called Creepy Keys. Now, as you guys know, I like making creepy, haunting, and really just unsettling sounds. So, like I said, this one's called Creepy Keys, and it sounds something kind of like this. Now, that's the Silent Hill melody. You can also go a little bit harmonic minor and kind of make it a little bit more tensiony, I suppose. Yeah. Anyway, so this is creepy, but the main concept that we're going to be diving into for this patch is using a little bit of FM to kind of get this certain type of texture, and then we're going to build a patch around that. So with that being said, we have this fresh copy of Pigments right over here in the background. So let's go to a new preset, just to make sure we are starting from scratch. Now let's switch the wavetable to the analog, which is my personal favorite. Now, if you look at this guy, we're using the analog engine, we're using a little bit of the sample engine and a little bit of the utility engine, and then effects and so on and so forth. One filter though, so it's not too crazy. So if you're looking at our analog engine, we can see the first thing that we're doing is pitching the whole thing up by 2 octaves or 24 semitones. So let's do that real quick. So we have this. Now, if we look here, we have 2 sine waves. Now let's change this. So we're going to a sine wave and then a sine wave. Now, the first one is in the mix 100%, so 0 dB. The second one is going to be at negative 8.89. So let's go ahead and add that. Negative 8.89. That's probably, there we go. Okay, so the second one here is going to be down an octave, so they're going to be a little different. So we have that kind of sound. Okay, so not too crazy, 2 sine waves, 1 down an octave, but the whole thing up 2 octaves, right? A little bit of math there. But anyway, the interesting spot is this oscillator down here, oscillator number 3. So this one is up by 1 octave. Let's bring this all the way to 1 octave. The waveform is going to be a triangle, so let's go ahead and select the triangle wave. Now, if we look at this guy, what is the purpose of this one? Because we have no volume, it's down, negative 70, it's not even on, but we are using this as FM for both of these here. So if we switch back to the first one, so this guy, we can see that this FM is just modulated a little bit by envelope 2 at 0.35. So if we go back to this guy, we have our FM all the way down, and both of these buttons should be selected because we want this third oscillator to FM 1 and 2. So we grab envelope 2, drag and drop this here, and then I believe we did 0.35, right? 0.35. Okay, so now if we look at this guy, we're kind of almost getting a bell sound that can also maybe be used for an electric piano or something kind of like that. Really notice the texture that we're getting via this FM here. And then my brain just went, let's make this creepy. But anyway, this is the kind of thing that we're going to be working around. So envelope, let's go to envelope 2. Let's kind of look and see what this guy is doing. So attack 1, which is default. Decay 500 is default. Sustain 0 is default. The release 100, I believe, as well is default. Yep, that is default. And then the curve is negative 2, which again is default. So really in this case, all we got to do is drag and drop the envelope down to this FM at 0.35. But keep in mind, you don't have to just keep the defaults here. You can make the curve a little bit tighter. So really, it's just kind of like a transient of FM that kind of changes that sound a little bit. But that's kind of cool for this. Now, we don't really want endless sustain for this. So as you can see here, we brought the amp sustain all the way down like that. And then for the decay, we did 462. So 462. And then what did we do for our release here? We did 527. So we can bring this up to 520. Oh my God. Jeez, there we go. 527. So it kind of sounds like this now. Right, kind of a cool little, you could even use it as a pluck sound or maybe an ARP or something like that. But we're making creepy keys today. We're getting a little weird, which is, I guess that's a weird thing to say. Anyway, okay, so we have this done. Now we need to go to a filter. Now for this sound, I wanted to use a bandpass because it's going to be creepy. It's going to be kind of old, kind of weird sound. So what's better than cutting off a little bit of the low end and the high end at the same time? So that's what we're going to do. So we're here on multi-mode, so let's click this drop-down menu here, and I believe we used a bandpass 12. Yeah, we did bandpass 12. Keyboard tracking is going to be all the way up, by the way, so bring this here. Now, our cutoff by default is going to be 546, so we can bring that down like that. So we have this sound, and then our resonance is going to be 0.224. There we go. Okay, but on this guy, we have a little bit of, not really modulation, but we're controlling this cutoff via a macro. So macro 1 at 0.25, and this is called tone. Sometimes I put cutoff, but sometimes tone is a little bit better because this is going to be kind of a small range, right? 0.25. So what we can do is we can get this first macro, drag and drop, and then this is going to be 0.25 by default. So just double click and label this as tone. So it is doing the filter cutoff, but it's more so a tonality kind of thing, which I guess is kind of oranges to apples, or apples to oranges, or to some fruit. Okay, so we have this done. That's pretty cool. So now let's hop into the effects. So here we have EQ, compression, delay, and then shimmer. So the first EQ here, and this is kind of really not like, you don't have to do the exact same moves, but the whole concept here, if you go to a parametric EQ, if we look at this guy, we're kind of just cutting off some of this low stuff that we maybe don't really want. So that kind of stuff. And then maybe using the second one to kind of find another spot of that. Yeah, it's kind of gross there. So brought that down. And then get a little bit of that high end back. So it's a little bit more pokey, but maybe that's a big move here, so we can kind of tuck that down there a little bit. So it's pretty similar to that. Maybe this guy's a little bit too much. And then for the next guy, we're doing some compression and 4:1 ratio for that guy. So drag and drop, click list drop, I suppose, on this compressor, and then 4 like that, and then get a little bit of deeps here. Maybe something like that. Okay. Ooh, something I think we need to do. No, that's on the effects. Never mind. I was thinking about something else. But anyway, okay. So we're back here in the effects, and then we go to our delay. Is going to be the next guy. So this one here, we have a dotted eighth note, which is kind of interesting. So click here, go to the dotted, and then we're going to go to an eighth note. Now this guy is on a macro, and this is macro 4, which is effects at, we have 0.30, so we can go ahead and do that. So drag and drop 0.30, and we can actually bring this macro all the way up. And while we're here, we can double click and label this as X, as FX. There we go. So we have this here, and then we just really need to cut some of the high frequencies and the low frequencies. So cut the lows and then cut the highs here. Okay, so we have that guy, and the next one is going to be delay. Now, again, you don't have to copy the exact same values, but the whole concept is kind of building around this thing and kind of just following that timeline, which is kind of cool. That's one thing with building patches and sound design is start with one interesting concept and kind of just let your brain go and see where that timeline leads you. So next one is going to be another delay here, but this one is going to be a straight time. So you can hear straight only, and then we're going to be in 1/16. And kind of same thing, drag and drop these here. Now this is going to be also on a macro, same macro 4 at 30. So we can bring this down, macro 4, drag and drop, and bring this to 30. Cool. So we have that. And then the next one is going to be a shimmer reverb. Now this is really what kind of drives in the creepiness home here. So drag and drop here, and then find our shimmer. There we go. It's funny because like I've looked at this list so many times, but I still have to look where things are. I don't know why that is. Anyway, we're on shimmer here. Now the dry wet's also going to be on the macro 4 because it's effects at 0.24. So again, we can drag and drop this here while we're here, and then go to 0.24. And we have some nice, beautiful shimmer reverb, but instead of the pitch shift going up an octave, I like just bringing it down by 1 semitone, which I'm pretty sure that's what I did here. Yeah, 1 semitone, and maybe the feedback down a little bit here. Kind of hear it kind of just diving down a little bit there. Yeah, so kind of a cool little sound there. And then macro 3, we have this thing called the sub, which we do pretty often here on the channel. So utility engine, let's kind of look at this guy real quick and add some more of these. So utility engine, this guy is going to be doing a couple different things. So Like I said, we have our sub oscillator here, which is a sine wave down an octave, and we're kind of just modulating this or controlling this via macro 3. So macro 3, let's turn this first on here, drag and drop macro 3, bring this down, and the exact value we did here was 0.66. So we can bring this up to 0.66, something like that here, and then relabel this as sub. So we have that sub there if we need it for whatever reason. Now this is kind of left at halfway just in case. It's kind of a middle ground. You can put more or less if you want to. Now this next macro we see here is called noise. Now if we look at this guy here, we see this volume. This is macro 2 at 0.25. So the whole point of this here is to basically give us a little bit of a transient once we start hitting the notes. So it kind of has a little bit of noise there. So if you look at this one here, this is going to filter 2 because we don't really want to have anything to do with this bandpass filter. We want it just by itself, alone, doing its own thing. So bring this to filter 2 and bring the volume all the way down. And then if we look at this guy here, this is going to be macro 2 at 0.25. So this isn't necessarily modulated, it's more so controlled. So drag and drop here at default. And as we play something, we hear a little bit of that noise. Now, if we mute this engine here, we can hear this a little bit better. Just a little bit of that transient there. And that's all we really need. And it's one of those things that's very subtle. If it was gone, you probably wouldn't notice it, but with it being there, it kind of almost fills in this gap that makes it sound a little bit better. It's all the tiny little things in that sense. Okay. So we have that pretty much all good there. Now we look at the sample engine. Now this one is more so meant to just reinforce this sound here. Now we went to sample engine and we're going to go to ePiano C6 Alt. So if we go here, turn this guy on and scroll down to this ePiano C6 Alt, this guy. Now if we turn this engine off here, now that's kind of just a little bit in the background of that as well, and our volume is at 0, so we really don't have to change too much. It's going to filter 1. So we're pretty much set in that sense. Now the whole reason for this engine 2 of this sample here is this kind of just reinforcing that first engine's kind of keyboard, kind of bell-ish sound via the FM, and kind of almost just convincing our ears that that's what the sound is trying to be. So with that being said, we have something kind of like that. And let's label this as noise because macro 2 would drive me crazy. So N-O-I-S-E. And that's basically how this patch was built around that. So the whole thing, like I said, in the beginning, is if we go to this analog engine, we're basically using 2 sine waves and FMing this by this triangle wave, which is up by 1 octave. Now the delays are a little bit much, which was kind of a choice on my part, but you don't have to keep them so high if you don't want to. You can either bring down the effects or you can bring them down individually. Maybe these delays can maybe go down to like, I don't know, 13%, something like that. Bring those down to 0.13 or 1.2, whatever. And you can do something like that and play around with the tone. But yeah, that's the whole concept, doing the FM stuff and start making a weird kind of texture to a sound and then just build off from there, and who knows what you're going to create. That's a lot of the times what I do. I'll start with some weird little concept in the beginning and then just kind of start adding a little bit onto that, like, ooh, what would go good with this? What would go good with that? And then you eventually end up with creepy keys or whatever it is you do. So yeah, thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you learned something, and we'll see you in the next video.